everyone, I'm Dave Thomas, and today I am building the Engage model rocket by Custom Rocketry. And this is a really long rocket. This is essentially Custom's version of the Mean Machine or the Cobra 1500 by Estes. This is a relatively simple rocket, although because of its length and the necessity to glue a bunch of parts together, this is considered a skill level 2 or kind of intermediate level rocket. So you'll probably want to have built a few simpler rockets before this, but there's nothing inherently difficult about it. So as we always do, we'll go ahead and open this up and make sure we have all of the parts. Somewhere down in here we've got instructions. There we go. Alright, and there may be things stuck in the instructions. Okay, I like the fin material there. So let's get here first of all. Alright, so we have 3 body tubes. Okay, we have a fin marking guide, and this is also the shock cord mount, and that's kind of stuck itself here to the decal set. And this is all one big decal that can be cut apart here. Alright, here are the fins, and these are die cut. We'll just have to loosen them to take them out. Alright, we've got a small parts package here that contains a motor mount tube, centering rings, engine clip, and a shock cord, and a launch lug there. Okay, it looks like that this does not use an actual engine block, it just uses the top of the clip. Alright, we have 2 couplers that will be used to attach all the body tubes together. Okay, we have a nose cone here. Alright, now this nose, alright, there should be a screw eye that goes with the nose cone. Let's check in here for that. Okay, this is pretty cool. We've got a silver Mylar parachute, and this we'll have to assemble ourselves, so it's got the adhesive discs and the shroud line material there. Okay, now there we go, there's the screw eye. It's in with the motor mount package there. So it looks like we have everything that's supposed to be here. So I will go ahead and clear most of this away and we will get started. Alright, for the first part of this we're going to need the motor mount tube, the engine clip, and the centering rings from the small parts package there. And the first thing we need to do is make some marks on this. So before anything else, I'm going to mark inside the tube aft on the rear end of this so I don't get this confused later on. And then now I'm going to take a ruler here, and we need to make marks at 3/4 of an inch, 2 inches, and 2.5 inches from the aft end. Okay, so here we're going to have 3/4 of an inch, and make these fairly broad marks because the engine clip is going to extend across them. One at 2 inches here, and then one at 2.5. Okay, now that 2.5 inch mark is where we're going to cut a little slit just wide enough for the engine retainer clip. I've got a blunt. The very tip of my knife there has been broken off. Alright, so this is just going to pop right in there. Okay, until it makes a liar out of me. There we go. Alright, and then our centering rings, when we cut those out, those are going to go at our other 2 marks there. Okay, now down in here, this rocket is just using that little oops, got that on there backwards. It's using this extension here. That little bit is what's retaining the motor. And notice there, I did exactly what I had intended not to do. So here, I'm just going to change that around, fortunately, since we haven't installed anything yet. All right, now this is my aft end. Okay. Decades of experience, you can still make stupid mistakes like that. It happens to all of us. All right, now I do have, in my parts box, extra engine blocks, and I'm going to put one in there because I don't like using that little tiny piece of metal as my only thrust point for that motor. So here I just got a bunch of these from one of the rocketry companies. I don't even remember which now. Okay, but that can go in there. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and apply a little bit of glue to that. Now normally we put glue inside the tube and then add whatever it is to it, but I don't want glue to get down inside the motor mount tube where it might cause a motor to get stuck. So in this case I'm going to apply it to the ring, and that way any excess glue will come up on top rather than down inside the tube there. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and put this in. Alright, and you want that to be level there. Now again, if you don't have this, it is optional. And I said the manufacturer just made this to go the way it is. Okay, so we'll just let that sit and dry for a little bit. It's not going to be structural at this point, so once we're ready for it, we can come back. Alright, we also need to cut out the centering rings here. These are die cut, so they're mostly cut out. We just need to cut off the little tabs there. And hopefully that should just pop out through there. Now if they didn't get it cut all the way through, you might have to trace around it with your knife. Alright, now we'll first just dry fit these on. Okay, so these will go over the clip like that. And we want to try and keep that clip straight. Alright, the other one will come down like this. Okay, so it looks like everything's going to go together easily enough. So I'm just going to put both of these rings to the outside of their markings. And here I'm just going to run a bead of glue. Okay, we're just going to smooth that around first. It's not a big deal on this one if you happen to get glue on the clip, because all the bendy parts are going to be on the other side of it. So now I'm just going to move this back up to where that line was. Try and keep the ring as perpendicular to the tube as I can. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing over here. Alright, now this is relatively thin cardboard on these centering rings, so I want to make sure I get some really good fillets on them. Okay, I'll bring that one back down to its line. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and fillet the other side of this. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to allow that to completely dry before we try and mount it into the tube. While the glue on the motor mount is drying, I do want to turn our attention to the body tubes for just a moment. Now we'll go ahead and mark these for fins in a little bit, but two of these things you really don't need to do anything to. So these will be the middle and top tubes here. This one will have the shock cord and the parachute in it, but if you're going to paint this, you might want to consider painting at least the top two tubes ahead of time before we put fins and everything on it and before we put it together. And part of the reasoning for that is just this is going to be about 5 feet long when it's done, and trying to paint a 5-foot rocket all at once is a little bit challenging. It's a whole lot easier to paint individual tubes. And this, regardless of whether you want to paint the rocket all one color or alternate colors on the tubes, things like that, you might want to consider go ahead and painting these. And that's what I'm going to do. So the top two tubes I'll paint ahead of time. The bottom tube I won't paint until I get the fins and the launch lug on. While we're still waiting for the motor mount glue to dry, we can also turn our attention to the fins and the nose cone. We'll start with the nose cone here. And this has got some flash on it, just excess plastic from the molding process. And I'm just going to gently move that off. Okay, yes, for those of you that like to point things out, I was cutting toward myself, but in a controlled manner. If you like this better. And you don't necessarily have to remove all of it. If you want a really nice even finish, you can take this and just run it on a little bit of fine sandpaper. This is a little bit of 220. Once we get the excess flash off, you can just run it around here a little bit. And again, this is detail stuff. It doesn't make a whole lot of difference if you do it or not. Okay, now this is a pretty small little screw eye here, and it's supposed to screw into this hole. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and screw that down. But I am kind of concerned that there's not a lot of grip there. So what I'll do is now I'm going to back that out. Now that it's cut its own threads there. Okay, and I'm going to put a little bit of super glue down inside of that. You could also use plastic model cement, which I think I'm going to do is I can't find my super glue next to the bench here. Alright, so this is a brush-on type model cement, and I can just put that right in the hole there. And that's going to partially melt that plastic temporarily. In fact, that made it really bigger already there. So I'm going to tighten that down, and when that dries, it should actually form the plastic around the threads on that. Right, I set aside the nose cone to dry, and now what I'm going to do is take the whole sheet of fin material here, and I'm going to sand both sides of it. Now if your fins have already come undone, then you can just do this to individual fins. I'm going to use some 150 grit sandpaper and just sand the entire thing here. Once you've got that sanded, if you have a little bit of compressed air or canned air or duster like that, you might want to blow through this. Let's see if I can get mine to work without shooting all over the lab here. Mainly what I'm trying to do here is get the sanding dust out of the die cut areas so I can see where I actually need to cut through this. So now I can simply take my hobby knife here and just finish cutting through the die cut regions here. And usually there's just a little tab or two, but sometimes it doesn't go all the way through. So they made really efficient use of that balsa. There's hardly any scrap material left. With the fins cut out, now I'm going to round the leading edge here. And if you note here on the root edges, let's see if we get this to come in focus here. On the root edges, there's a little tiny notch, not even cut all the way through, just that little marking there, and that's to indicate the root edge that'll go against the rocket. So our leading edge is here, and I'm just going to round this over using some 150 grit sandpaper. And I'm going to start by simply knocking down the corner edge there. Okay, and then I can just rotate my wrist a little bit here as I sand, and that will cause a rounding over of the edge. Alright, and then I want to check this every so often in cross section from both ends to make sure that I'm keeping it even. And depending on the individual piece of balsa, this may go a little quicker or a little slower. Some balsa's more porous and softer and tends to sand really quickly. Others a little bit more resistant. Okay, so that looks pretty good there. Depending on your personal preferences, you can also round or taper the trailing edge here. The advantage of that is it does give you better aerodynamics, but this is going to be a fairly heavy rocket, and so you're not going to be setting altitude and speed records with it. The disadvantage is that it makes the fin weaker, especially if you taper that trailing edge. It'll be really prone to cracking. So personally, I'm just going to round the leading edge and leave the rest of the edges alone. Regardless of what you do, you don't want to do anything to this root edge. Leave it nice and flat. I'm going to do the other 3 fins off camera and then come back. I've rounded the leading edge on all 4 fins here. And the other thing I'm going to do now is just stack them together like this. And the other edges, I'm just going to drag across some sandpaper here a couple of times, just to remove any little nubs and such that are left over from the cutting process. While we're waiting for the motor mount glue to dry inside, we'll go ahead and mark the body tube for the fins and the launch lug. And this came on a separate sheet. So we just need to cut this out. We don't have to worry about cutting out the instructions. And we're going to wrap it around the body tube here and then overlap, so these lines should line up like that. And I'm just going to use a small piece of masking tape here to hold that together temporarily. Now I want my launch lug to be on the same side as my engine mount clip, so right there. And I'm going to use one more piece of masking tape here just to lock this in place so it doesn't slide around as we're marking it. Okay, and now we're just going to go through and make a little tick mark on each line here as we go around. And then for the launch lug, I'm going to put a little LL down here. Okay, now we can take that back off, set it aside in case we need to redo something. Now the easiest way to do this is to simply put this up against a door edge or a drawer edge, or you can use this handy fin marking guide. This is one that Estes makes, and it's just a whole bunch of straight edges here. And so you just find the edge that matches the size of your tube, and then you can use that to connect these dots. Okay, so I'm just going to go along here and just go a little bit longer than the actual fin is. Now I'm going to come back to that launch lug line in just a moment. Now for the launch lug, I want that line to extend all the way down the tube. So get this as close as possible to the edge. Okay, because when we actually put all these tubes together, the launch lug we're going to cut in half, and one will go down at the bottom and one will go at the top of this, and that will give us the maximum coverage on the launch rod when this goes to launch. Okay, now the fins are going to be glued on at 1.5 inches from the end. So we're going to go ahead and make a mark here on each one. Okay, and it looks like I didn't quite get that one on straight. I'm going to redo this line. So now we'll go ahead and measure 1.5 inches from the aft end on each of our lines here. So there's going to be one right there. Right there. Okay, now what I'm going to do is just take a piece of sandpaper, and just about any will do, and I'm going to check my length here. So the fin's going to go like this. Alright, so I haven't gone beyond on any of my lines. So what I'm going to do is just scratch the surface from where I just made that mark up to the end of the line. And just do this once or twice here. All this is doing is breaking up the glossy finish, and this is going to make the glue hold better. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same for the launch lugs. Now, in the instructions it shows putting the launch lug up here to 1.5 inches as well. I'm going to not do that. I'm going to put mine down lower, just so it's got that little bit more time to stay on the launch rod as it comes up. Alright, and then the other one's going to go right up here flush with the forward end of the first tube. Okay, so now we can go ahead and start putting on the fins. For this you're going to need your wood glue or white glue and a lot of patience. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to put a very thin bead of glue along here. I Even that's too thick. Alright, I'm going to use my finger here. I want to make this nice and even, and we don't want big blobs on it. This is something that beginning Rocketeers tend to do, is they think more glue is going to be better. The problem is more glue takes a lot longer to dry. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up the aft corner of my fin there with my horizontal line. I'm going to put this on the line where we just sanded it, and I'm going to pull it back off again. So now I have 2 layers of glue, and I'm going to wait 30 seconds to allow these to get tacky. 30 seconds have passed, and now I'm going to go ahead and put this right back where I had it before. And what's happened now is the glue has gotten a little bit tacky, so that now I can just press this on and it will remain in place. All right, and this is one of the reasons I say that more glue is not necessarily better. If you use a lot of glue on this, it won't get tacky very quickly. Alright, now I'm going to line this up. I'm going to sight down the rocket. Make sure that's straight. Alright, make sure it's perpendicular to the rocket tube. Okay, and now we have to wait. So I recommend leaving this for about 15 minutes, and then you can go on to do the next ones. Okay, I recommend doing the opposite fin next so that you make sure that those are lined up straight, and then go to do side and side and make sure they're perpendicular to the first 2 fins. I'm going to do all that off camera and then come back. My fins are all glued on here, and they came out pretty nice. And can't quite get that into the camera there, but they also look pretty straight and aligned like we want them. So next I'm going to add the launch lug, and we need to start by cutting this in half. So I'm just going to measure this quickly. Okay, so we're at about 60 millimeters, 6 centimeters. So there's our halfway point. Okay, and I'm just going to cut through that. Just like that. And we're going to put this on in a similar way that we did to the fins, although we really don't need to pull them off and let them get tacky since there's not a lot of pressure being put on them. So find your fin line, or excuse me, your launch lug line there, in the places where we had roughened them up. Okay, and I'm just going to add a little glue. And again, we don't want a whole lot here. We'll strengthen this later with fillets. Okay, so I'm going to put that first launch lug on. And as I said, I'm doing it a little bit differently. The instructions have us put it up here at the same level of the fins. By putting it down lower, it gives us a little bit more contact time with the launch rod. Okay, now I'm going to sight down the tube, and the line and the body tube and the launch lug should all be nice and parallel and in line. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing up here with our forward launch lug. We're going to give it some glue too. Okay, and this is going to go up all the way at the forward end here, flush with the tube. And then once again, I'm going to sight down it. And the tube, the lines, and the launch lug should all line up. And they do. Okay. Now we can do one more thing here. I'm going to go ahead and put the fillets on. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and have some tissues ready, as it's always messy. Alright, and we just have to be careful about hitting the launch lug. Now if you're unsure about this, go ahead and let the launch lugs dry for about 10 or 15 minutes. We should be able to do this. Now I prefer to do facing fins at the same time, so we'll do these two. Alright, and then we're just going to smooth this in. And this will strengthen the fins, and it'll also, if you do them thick enough, will kind of blend the two surfaces in, so the fin surface kind of blends right into the body tube. Now initially that won't be very noticeable, and a lot of people just don't bother doing it. But if you want built up fins that have that pleasing curvature to them, you'll need to do it a little at a time. Don't try and just make a great big blob of glue on there, because it will just dry as great big blobs and will tend to run toward one end or the other. So build up your fillets layer by layer. And once you have the glue fillets in, if you want the heavier fillets, you can also use things like wood filler or plastic model contour putty to build those up. They actually build up better than glue does, but you want to have the glue layer underneath for strength, because the putties and fillers are not very structurally strong. Now sometimes what happens in here is as the glue dries it forms bubbles. The bubbles won't affect the strength really all that much, but they may be aesthetically less than pleasing to you. And the way to fix that is you either put another layer of glue over it once it's dried, or again use a filling type of material like the putty or the wood filler. Or you can just ignore them and paint over it. That part's kind of up to you. Alright, I'm going to let this dry horizontally so my fillets don't run in one direction or the other. Off camera, I will also put the fillets on the launch lugs after they've had a chance to dry for about 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll come back. Here I have all of the fillets in place, and they are still drying. My next task after this will be to prime and paint the lower body tube here. And then I'm already in the process of painting the two upper body tubes. They're going to be white. This is probably going to be red. And then the nose cone is also being painted. It's going to be blue. But once I've got everything painted, then I'll put it all together, and then we'll do the final assembly with the shock cord and the parachute and such. I'm at various stages of painting here. So the lower part of the rocket that actually has the fins and everything, this has been primered. And so this has had, let's see, 3 coats of sandable fillable primer. And you can see where it's filling in the wood grain there. And that's the reason I use this particular primer. So this is going to need to dry for a while. It needs a little bit of sanding and then top coating with color. Here the nose cone has had its final coat of paint. It's got about 4 coats of blue paint there. And then here we have the 2 upper body tubes. These have had, let's see here, 3 coats of white paint on them. And we're going to join these next. To join the 2 body tubes we'll need this coupler. And we need to find the halfway point on it. Okay, so that's about 32 millimeters, which means I need 16 millimeters here for the halfway point. Alright, and now I'm just going to take some wood glue or white glue, and I'm going to start by putting a bead of glue just inside one end of my tube here. Okay, you don't want it too heavy, but we do want an appreciable amount. And then we're simply going to put the coupler in here, and I'm going to twist it back and forth as I put it in to seat it up to that mark. Okay, and now we're just going to let that dry for just a few minutes so it doesn't slide up inside when we try to do the other side of the tube. A few minutes have passed, and so now we can go ahead and do the same thing to the other body tube here. So just pick an end, and we're going to add some glue to it as well. Alright, and then we'll take the two body tubes here, and we'll just mate those together. If you want to line up the spirals, you can, but it's not necessary. Alright, and I'm going to hold these for a couple of minutes and then just let them dry. While the glue is drying on the body tubes, we can assemble the parachute. Now, I did notice something here. This is obviously an older kit, and the adhesive for the little parachute discs here has dried out. It's no longer any good. So instead, I'm going to use these paper reinforcement rings. Okay, we'll go ahead and take this off. I'm going to open up the parachute film here. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is place one of these reinforcements at each corner. Then what we can do is just take a pencil or a pen or other small sharp object, and we're just going to poke a hole through here. Now you could use a hobby knife. The only reason I'm not is because it could cut too much. Okay, because I don't want to cut in this, I actually want it to puncture. That way it's less likely to rip later on. Nope, like that. Okay, actually rip through the reinforcements. So I'm going to reinforce that. Alright, so now I've got holes in all of those. And now we're going to take the shroud line material here and remove that really gross sticky tape there. And now I'm going to unravel this. Hopefully it doesn't make a big knot. Okay, and we need to make this into 3 equal pieces. So I'm just going to kind of wrap it around one finger here and then the other. And I'm going to pull this through. Okay, so now I've got, here we go, there's a loop and an end. I'm going to pull this the other direction. Oop. Keep it taut. And then back here, I've got a loop and an end. Now what I'm going to do is cut those off evenly. And then come back here. Again, keeping it taut so they stay the same length. Alright, I'm going to do the same thing, cut everything even right there. Okay, now this is the tricky part, is this is either nylon or polyester, and it's not going to hold a knot as well as cotton would. So the tricky part here is getting all these to be the same length and size as we put them on. So now we can gather all of these up. So I'm going to take each shroud line and gather it onto my finger here. Like that. And we're going to press this down in the middle and grab it from the back. And what I'm doing here is trying to get all of the corners to come down and meet in roughly the same place, which it looks like it's doing. Okay, back here I have all of the loops. Now you can go with the instructions here, as soon as I find them. Okay, and they show tying this directly onto the screw eye of the nose cone. Now you can do that, but if you've seen any of my videos before, you know that I like to use snap swivels for my parachutes. And here I can get away with a fairly small one because the nose cone has a little tiny screw eye on it. And you can get these from the fishing areas of department and sporting goods stores. Alright, so the loops that I had around my finger, I'm just going to draw way down here. And on the swivel side, the little round eyelet there, I'm going to stick those through. This can be the hardest part of the whole thing. There we go. Now I'm not letting go on the other side here. I've got my pinkies holding on to it. Alright, now I'm going to open up those loops once more. Okay, I've been running into problems with my camera shutting off before I'm quite done talking. And so what I've done here, and you missed just a few seconds of it, is once I had those loops open, I pull them down around the snap swivel and then just pull that tight to form a knot here. If that's not where you wanted it, if there's, if you've got loose shroud lines or something, you can undo it at that point and try again. And then once you're happy with that, I've already placed a little bit of glue on there to lock this in place, and then you just need to let this dry for about 10 minutes. Here I have the two body tubes glued together, and there's a very obvious seam here. You can do a couple of things with this. One is you can take some plastic model contour putty and just work that into here, and then give it another overcoat of paint. You could also add a little bit of glue in there and then do the same thing. I'm going to ignore it because I'm going to put a little kind of a pinstripe wrap decal around this. It doesn't come with the kit, but I've got lots of extra vinyl and such, and that will hide this. Just kind of as an aside, I'm building this rocket for the college where I work, and the idea here is that all of our incoming students are going to sign this somewhere, and then we're going to launch it at the end of their preview day. So here I have some self-adhesive vinyl, and this you can get at hobby stores. I think it's Cricut brand, but you can get this for little hobby decorators and such. A lot of times I'll get it off of models that you can just use the excess from their decals. Alright, this is cut to be just a little bit longer than the circumference. And so now I can apply that to my seam here. And then just kind of stretch it as I go around. And if I'm really good, this will line up perfectly. I'm just a little bit off there. Try again. There we go. And we just overlap those, squish that all down, and voila, no more seam. Okay, at this point I'm still waiting on the paint to dry for the rest of the rocket. And so I'm just cutting out the shock cord mount here, and we'll go ahead and install that. So to start with, we're going to put a fairly heavy bead of glue right on the shock cord mount here. And again, this can be white glue or wood glue. And I'm going to put the shock cord on at a bit of an angle so that when this folds over itself, it doesn't make a great big lump. It kind of spreads out the lumpiness. Okay, and the idea here is we just want glue and paper, so I'm going to try and squish out as much air as I can. And we'll just fold this over once more. Alright, and then I'm going to bend it into a concave shape here. And now I'm going to add some more glue to this side. And this is what will adhere it to the rocket. Now I can take my thoroughly glued up shock cord anchor here, and I'm going to put this in to the top of the tube assembly here, the white tubes. So I'm just going to push that in as far as I can go. It needs to be at least, say, 1.5 inches or about 50 centimeters there, just to make sure that we don't have any occlusion problems with the nose cone or something like that. Okay, so it's, I don't know if you can quite see that into the camera there, but it's down there more than far enough. Okay, and as soon as the glue and the paint dries on everything, we'll be ready to put all of this together. My painting is essentially done now. I've got the nose cone completely done, and it's nice and dry and everything here, so I'm just going to set it aside until we do the final assembly. The lower portion of the rocket here has been painted with 3 coats of red paint over the primer. The paint's still a little bit soft, so I'm not quite ready to mate this to the other body tubes yet, so I'm going to let that be set aside and dried. We are about ready to put everything together. All of the paint and glue that we've been doing is dry. And so now we just need to put the second coupler into the base of the rocket, and then we'll attach the other part to it. And once again, I'm just going to find a halfway point here. Okay, and then as before, I'm going to start with the lower part. So we'll just add a bead of glue right inside here. Okay, put our coupler in and just kind of twist it around as we go. Okay, I'm going to let that dry for just a few minutes. While I'm doing that, I'm also going to attach the nose cone to the other end of our shock cord here. Okay, and to this we'll just need a double knot or 2 half hitches. Okay, just pull that from multiple directions and make sure it's on there tight. I'm just going to put a little dab of glue on that and work it into the knot just so it doesn't come unraveled. And now I'm going to cut this back to about 5 millimeters there, so that it's less likely to get caught between the shoulder and the body tube. Okay, let's see if this is, it's pretty much stuck in there. Okay, so now we're going to go to the other end of the white tubes here and do the same thing. Alright, I'm going to run this all the way around the other way. Okay, so here again we're just going to run a bead of glue along the inside of the tube. Alright, now this does not need to go in any particular direction. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead and mate that there. Alright, now I'm going to stand this up. I won't be able to do it off camera, or on camera. But I'm going to let this dry for a few minutes, and then we'll come back and attach the parachute, and that should finish things up. Okay, the glue on the coupler is dry enough that we can handle this again. And so our last thing to do is to put the parachute on. So we're just going to put this on here. And for this rocket, I really recommend using a snap swivel, just because that is such a small screw eye there. Trying to get the shock cord and the parachute tied to it may become problematic. Okay, and I'm not going to prep this for flight, but I am going to fold the parachute here. So I'm just going to fold it into a triangle-ish. Okay, and then I'm just going to, I'll give it one more triangle here. Bring the shroud lines up into the triangle. And let's fold that down a little bit. Fold the edges around the shock cord. Bring that up one more time. And make a little cylinder out of that. Okay, we're going to stuff the shock cord down inside there. Okay, and then the parachute. And that. Okay, I'm going to give this a shake test here and make sure that nose cone doesn't come flying out, and it doesn't. It's pretty snug. Now, one thing I'm not going to do here is put the decals on. And recall I said earlier that I'm actually making this for the admissions department of my college, and they're going to have students signing all over this thing. So I am not going to worry about the decal for mine, although definitely you can put it on yours, and it's simply meant to wrap around the body tube here like this, so you can see it from all angles. And you can put that just about anywhere you want to. Alright, and so going from the tip toward the middle here, and out the back end. Okay, this is standing at about 5 feet long. I hope you had a good time building this with me. Have a great flight and a safe recovery. And please stay tuned for more of my videos.